Oh boy, it's been a while, hasn't it? No news is good news, right? Well, we need to talk about it. Okay, it's a little bit ramble, a little bit, vlog. What have I been up to? And also, I've got some interviews lined up. Well, hopefully it'll be good. Let's have a chat though. I need some insight. First, a little bit of background. I love Linux. Still love Linux. Use it every day. Well, yeah, pretty much every day for work, for play, for stuff in between, for special projects, doing all kinds of videos. Been doing more sort of really actually truly level 1 content on the level 1 channel for a little bit more accessibility. But I've also got some fire breathing epic servers that I've done projects with, and I don't know that I've really translated those to video all that well. I did the interview with Greg Crow Hartman on the main channel. If you didn't check that out, you should. It's a sort of a 1 year, almost a year and a half follow-up with GKH about how he's been using his Threadripper system, but also now he has a dual Epic system for software development and literally everything else. So that went really well. And I was looking back at some of the other projects that we've done together, thanks to your help and support, that have been pretty successful. I mean, I've done how-tos and write-ups and things like that, but there are other things that have reached deeper. I mean, over the last, since the beginning, VFIO, trying to push more people toward VFIO, because it's like, hey, if you connect the dots in these ways, you can run virtual machines for whatever it is that you need and have Linux on your host as your host operating system for your host computer. And then it makes it easy to change operating systems or move dependencies or have little compartmentalized things, because maybe you're solving one set of problems for one person over here, and you can set everything up just so that it's optimized for that set of problems, and then set up another set of virtual machines for something else. And then maybe you also like to play games. You don't want to have a bunch of extra hardware for that, so you set up some virtual machines for playing games that have hardware accelerated GPUs. And so some of them may be using remote desktop, some of them may be using para-virtualized GPUs, some of them may be using something else. But it's been really encouraging to see other VFIO communities grow, or like, I don't have to really push the envelope there too much. People are excited enough about it at this point. I mean, looking at how our own VFIO stuff has grown on the Level 1 forum, and the Reddit VFIO community, and the communities on the internet at large, it's really very encouraging. It's one way to sort of let you compute with maximum freedom, but without being tied to any one set of configuration. Like for me, it's comforting knowing that whatever that I'm doing in Windows and in a Windows virtual machine and that kind of thing, if that were to disappear tomorrow, it doesn't take me completely out of commission. I still have all of the stuff on my host operating system. I could recreate it if I really needed to, but the copy protection in one game going rogue and eating my files, the chances of that is smaller than it would be otherwise, where it's just like, oh yeah, I'll just let the game DRM have the run of the machine, and that's totally fine. It's not actually fine. Jeff with the Looking Glass project is incredible. It's got hundreds of thousands of dollars of developer time in it at this point, and it is a very viable way with a very high frame rate and compression and separate cursor tracking. Another company, companies are getting behind this whole, hey, maybe we need to be able to run different workloads on a GPU simultaneously. So on GitHub, I'm really excited by the VGPU unlocker, which will let you have virtual GPUs on hardware that wasn't meant for it. So if you got a 2000 series NVIDIA card, you can run multiple VMs on a single 2080 or a single 2080 Ti or 2070. And that's coming probably-ish for the 3000 series cards. And there are commercial companies that sort of see the writing on the wall as well. Arc Compute is doing libvf.io, which is really exciting. I've got a video for that is in the planning stages. Doing this, having the plumbing for this, paves the way for better security as well. The more this kind of stuff works and the more it's reliable, the more self-contained and sandboxed every little thing can be. And that's some of the argument why the DRM companies are saying, oh, we don't want you to be able to run a game under Linux, is because the people that cheat apparently are ahead of us all, are apparently are watching all of the content and the how-tos and the stuff like that I'm doing, and they're using that as a platform for their cheating, because they're virtualizing a Windows machine so well it's indistinguishable almost from bare metal. And because of that, the host computer, the host operating system, can peek into memory and do all sorts of things that are way off script, which apparently enables cheating and makes cheating a lot easier. So they don't. Now, some of that's an excuse, and some of that probably is connected to reality for competitive games. But nonetheless, I find the whole thing really sort of interesting. Intel also seems to be driving this a little bit, because with what Google is doing with Stadia, you know, that sort of spurred Intel to say, oh, we might need an answer that works kind of like Stadia. And so, at least from what I can tell with one API and some of the work that Intel has been doing on Arc, some of the plumbing that's necessary to do this kind of thing in hardware is there in the Arc GPUs. You know, the Arc GPUs have launched, I guess, in China, and are launching. The performance not really there yet, but parallel virtualization and a good software stack for supporting them, that could be an answer for, you know, a Linux-based workstation card, and that part is really exciting. I like that, at least on the periphery, I sort of had stuff to do with those projects. My excitement for VFIO, because, you know, thinking that's the future, and sort of drumming up that enthusiasm in others, I think has led to a stronger community, and I think that we can sort of move the needle there. And thanks to your support, I was able to do that, and so that's really awesome and super exciting. Valve also, in a much larger way, is doing something really similar. The Steam Deck and all of the support and everything for the Steam Deck, it's approaching some of the same kinds of goals that VFIO has, being that you can just take your stuff and run it anywhere, but they're tackling it head on, where I'm just sort of stuffing the Lovecraftian horror in a box and not worrying about the particular details of it. There are legions of very skilled developers that are recreating a simulated Lovecraftian horror in terms of the graphics API and the stuff that the games use, and building the support so that you can run the games directly natively, which is nice. I can't say that, you know, in another 2 or 3 or 4 generations of GPU where virtualized GPUs are a little bit more accessible, Valve probably would enable that kind of functionality as well. But it is really encouraging to see that support is coming around from the other side as well for a standardized operating system. And meanwhile, you know, Microsoft is not unmoved by this. Microsoft is moving more in that direction themselves as well. The Windows subsystem for Linux, something that would have never been supported under, you know, the Steve Ballmer administration. Microsoft is kind of sort of, embracing is perhaps too strong a word, but they are providing a competent platform for developers to be able to do things, because containerization, at least in servers, and repeatability and immutability and tracking all of this kind of stuff in a Git repository has come a long way. Speaking of which, another related thing that I've been thinking about for a video, but haven't put the work in to make it materialize, but I'm going to share it so that you can, you know, engagement challenge, let me know what you think. I think distro hopping, you know, the clickbait headline for the video is probably going to be distro hopping isn't a thing anymore, or distro hopping isn't necessary. And the reason for that is because I'm still using Fedora, but it's, you know, I'm running, and Fedora, you know, you got to update it. But I've also been running a couple of other machines with Arch Linux and Manjaro. My 2 main machines are Threadripper machines, a Threadripper and a Threadripper Pro 32 core, both of them. They're the longest lived, and they basically, you know, been with me since launch day for both platforms. So I've had the 3970 a little longer. Those machines are nice. They'll do basically anything. I can have huge jobs running in the background, and context switching is no problem. And for any kind of, you know, like developer productivity, problem solving productivity, I need to, you know, okay, I've got a huge mess of stuff open. I need to preserve the state of the machine so that when I do a context switch and I come back to it, it's exactly the way that I left off. That's great. Windows can't do that. Windows absolutely cannot do that. If you leave Windows on for a long time with a lot of windows open, it eventually gets so unresponsive that when you hit like Control-Alt-Delete, it'll just hang for 10 or 15 seconds while it's enumerating something in the background. Linux doesn't have that problem, and Linux will let me have multiple virtual desktops, and I can context switch, and it does a really good job managing all those kinds of things. But looking at just the general end user desktop experience for, I don't want to call it megatasking, but just that kind of stuff, it is incredible how far GNOME and KDE have come over the last year or two, and how much faster they are and how much more responsive they are. At the same time, I've also been using Ubuntu over that period, and it seems like Ubuntu server and desktop have kind of diverged a little bit, to the point that if you install the GUI experience on Ubuntu server, for example, all sorts of bizarre broken things happen. Like Network Manager wants to take over the network, but then when you reboot, systemd is not using, it's using NetPlan instead of Net Manager, and this has been a problem since 20.04, and they don't really seem interested in fixing it. And snaps, if you have volumes on your machine that are mounted from the network, it's still a little problematic using snaps with network accessible shares. Meanwhile, those kinds of problems are better on Manjaro and Arch. Steam and Bleeding Edge, the right mix of Bleeding Edge and some of the other stuff is really good. And part of the reason I mention that now is because how Arch and Manjaro do that is not hiding some of the complexity of what's going on in terms of like the developer and get and compile stuff is going on. Not to the extent of like Gentoo. I can, with this audience, I can sort of talk about these kind of things. But when you use the AUR, you're working with a Git repository and diffs and some scripts, and it's kind of easy to see what it's doing. With the package manager, it's like, yeah, I can go, the Debian package manager, for example, it's like, yeah, I can go and get a Debian package and get the source for it, and then get the patches that the Debian maintainer has applied. But those people are like me. I'm just using my system for a year or two, and it's not broken, so I have no reason to stick my head up and say, oh, how is this going? Is this working? Is this thing's changing? But so much has changed with the Linux kernel in the last couple of years in terms of hardware support and bleeding edge and drivers and everything else, that things generally work better on Arch and Manjaro because there's a lot of developers and a lot of people working on them. But also, a lot of the dependency and library problems that you have in Debian and Ubuntu and things like that seem to go away when you're sort of living on the bleeding edge with a distro like Manjaro or Arch. And because it gives you, it's like, here's the Git repository, here's the version of the compiler, let's do a compile, this is a library version. You have those problems less. You can still have them, like you can still have competing versions of glibc, which is not a great situation and maybe a conversation for another day. But generally, if you keep up with the updates, it works pretty well. So why am I sharing all of this background? Well, it has to do with content. I want to do something with this channel that is more oriented toward doing something good, that is more sort of long-term oriented. I don't think it's particularly useful to talk about the utility du jour. I don't think it's particularly useful to talk about, oh, this distro or that distro, or we should distro hop from this distro to that distro, or distro, this, that, and the other. Is like, what's the latest innovation here? I think that it would probably be a better use for you, the viewer, your time, and also mine. It's like, what are some problems that we can actually solve? Like, what are some things we can work together on? And maybe I can get some more interviews from folks in the Linux community and hear their perspective. There's a lot that we can do to come together to solve some of the functionality and plumbing issues that are both unglamorous and that no one is going to sing your praises for. Maybe we can do some fun content just on configuring and doing server stuff, because I've got all these servers, but I don't know what kind of problems you're trying to solve in your real world careers. So engagement challenge, what are the kinds of things that you're working on, or what would be useful resources for you to see and experiment with, beyond just, I need to run a web server, I need to run a containerized Kubernetes workload, I need to run this, that, and the other. I think we can get a lot of mileage out of like, why would you want to switch from a whole bunch of scripts into Kubernetes? Why would you want to do this over that? Why is, you know, OpenShift or Open Compute a really good option for mixing on-prem and cloud resources? What does the VMware Broadcom thing mean for me, the system administrator, helping maintain projects, you know, within my company? I think we can do some chats about those kind of things, but I think I can also interview people. Jeremy Solar from System 76. I've been meaning to have him on here for a couple of months. We just keep missing each other on our schedules. But he'll probably be the next interview that I do. So if you have questions that you would like me to ask, let me know. I've got a list of questions on my own, so that's not critical, but it's really interesting the things that he's doing, not just with System 76 and Pop! OS, but also the Rust stuff and the Rust integration. So the timing of this video couldn't be better with kernel 5.20 adding some of the Rust stuff. If you've been living under a rock, the Rust stuff is really interesting, and maybe we could talk about that if you are not really read in on that. But I would also like for this to be a regular occurrence. Maybe we can do videos every week, every couple of weeks, or we just sit down with a little fireside chat and chat about all things Linux, or things that you have questions about. And so maybe we can set up a forum, a thread for that on the forum. We can try this for a few weeks and see how it goes. But yeah, so let's keep the conversation going. And there's a link to the level 1 thread, the first level 1 thread below. But comments here I'll keep an eye on, and all that kind of stuff. And, you know, thanks for hanging with me, thanks for hanging out, and thanks for watching. And let's do something interesting. I've got an itch, but I'm not sure exactly precisely where it is. But we'll do something. All right, I'm signing out, and you can find me in the level 1 forums.